Female CEO on wheelchair sat alone at the table until a billionaire asked her, "Will you be my date?" But what happened next will restore your faith in unexpected love. Picture this, the most powerful woman in the room, reduced to watching life happen around her while she sat forgotten in the corner. That's exactly what was unfolding at the city's most exclusive charity gala, and trust me, you won't believe how this story ends. Before we dive in, hit that like button if you believe in second chances, subscribe for more incredible love stories, and share this with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't defined by their circumstances. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time when someone saw your true value when you couldn't see it yourself. Amelia Hart was the kind of CEO who commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals before breakfast, until one rainy Tuesday changed everything. The crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the marble floor of the grand ballroom, where the city's elite gathered for the annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala. Amelia Hart adjusted her position at table 12, her crutches leaning against the pristine white tablecloth beside her. She smoothed down her emerald evening gown, the same one she'd worn to countless galas before, back when she'd glided across these floors with confidence that could move mountains. 3 weeks had passed since the accident. 3 weeks since her world had shifted on its axis, leaving her with a permanent limp and a confidence that seemed to have shattered along with her left leg. The doctors said she was lucky, the drunk driver who'd run the red light could have killed her. But sitting here now, watching her colleagues network and laugh without so much as a glance in her direction, lucky felt like the cruelest joke. She traced the rim of her untouched champagne glass, remembering how different things had been just a month ago. Back then, she was Amelia Hart, the unstoppable force who'd built Hart Industries from a small startup into a tech empire worth hundreds of millions. She was the woman who never backed down from a challenge, who turned every obstacle into an opportunity. Now, she felt like a ghost haunting her own life. The empty chairs around her table told their own story. Her assistant had made excuses, prior commitments, family emergencies, sudden illnesses. But Amelia knew the truth. In their world, weakness was contagious, and nobody wanted to catch what she had. Even Marcus, her ex-fiancé, had proven that theory correct when he'd ended their engagement just days after she'd come home from the hospital. "I can't handle this version of you," he'd said, not even having the decency to look her in the eye. "You're not the woman I fell in love with anymore." His words echoed in her mind as she watched him across the room, his arm wrapped around a blonde socialite who laughed at his jokes with practiced perfection. The same jokes that used to make Amelia roll her eyes. Now they just made her stomach turn. She considered leaving early, again. It had become her signature move lately, the graceful exit before anyone could pity her or, worse, ignore her completely. But something kept her rooted to that chair. Maybe it was stubbornness, or maybe it was the last flickering ember of the woman she used to be, refusing to be extinguished. The auction had just begun when she noticed him. Damian Cole moved through the crowd like a shark through water, purposeful, predatory, and completely unbothered by the social currents that swept everyone else along. She'd heard of him, of course. Everyone in business had. The billionaire investor who could make or break companies with a single phone call. The man who'd built an empire so vast that even she, with all her success, felt small in comparison. He was supposed to be cold, calculating, ruthless. The business magazines painted him as a man who saw people as numbers on a spreadsheet. So why was he walking directly toward her table? Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs as he approached. She straightened her shoulders, calling upon muscle memory of confidence she wasn't sure she still possessed. Around them, conversations quieted. Heads turned. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Damian stopped beside her chair, his presence commanding even in stillness. He was taller than she'd expected, with dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it and eyes the color of storm clouds. When he smiled, actually smiled, it transformed his entire face. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by nearby tables. "I couldn't help but notice you're sitting alone." Amelia felt heat creep up her neck. Here it comes, she thought. The pity. The charitable gesture from the billionaire who probably donated to causes for disabled executives. But then he did something that stopped her world completely. He extended his hand toward her, palm up, like an invitation. Like a choice. Will you be my date tonight? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around them, the room erupted in whispers. Phones appeared, no doubt capturing this moment for tomorrow's society pages. Amelia stared at his outstretched hand, her mind racing through 1,000 possibilities, 1,000 reasons to say no. But something in his eyes stopped her. There was no pity there. No charity. Just interest. Real, genuine interest. For the first time in weeks, Amelia Hart felt like herself again. Amelia's fingers trembled slightly as she placed her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, electricity shot through her, not the kind from romance novels, but something deeper. Recognition. As if her soul had been holding its breath and could finally exhale. Yes, she whispered, then cleared her throat and said it again with the authority that had once commanded boardrooms. Yes, I'd like that. Damien's smile widened, and he gently helped her to her feet. She reached for her crutches, expecting the familiar wave of self-consciousness that had plagued her for weeks. But when she looked up, his expression hadn't changed. He wasn't staring at her mobility aids or looking away in discomfort. He was simply waiting. "Shall we?" he asked, offering his arm. As they moved through the crowd, Amelia became acutely aware of every eye following them. The whispers grew louder, more urgent. She caught fragments of conversations. "Can you believe? Why would he? She's not even." But Damien seemed oblivious to it all. He guided her toward the auction display with the patience of someone who had all the time in the world. When she needed to pause to adjust her grip on her crutches, he stopped without question, using the moment to point out an interesting piece of art or share a quiet observation about the evening. "You know," he said as they paused before a painting of a storm-tossed lighthouse, "I've always admired lighthouses. They stand strongest when the waves are trying to tear them down." Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. There was a story there, hidden beneath the surface of his composed exterior. "You sound like you speak from experience," she said. His laugh was soft, almost bitter. "More than I care to admit." They found seats at a small cocktail table near the auction stage. Damien pulled out her chair with the same natural grace he'd shown all evening, and Amelia found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks. When the waiter approached, Damien ordered for both of them without asking, sparkling water with lime for her, black coffee for himself. "How did you know?" she asked, surprised. "You've been nursing that champagne all evening without taking a sip. Either you don't drink, or you're too nervous to trust yourself with alcohol tonight." His eyes twinkled with amusement. "I'm betting on the latter." She laughed, actually laughed, and the sound surprised them both. "You're very observant for a billionaire investor." "Observation is how I stay alive in business. And please, call me Damien. We're on a date, after all." The auction continued around them, but Amelia found herself drawn into conversation with this enigmatic man who seemed to see right through her carefully constructed walls. He asked about her company, her innovations, her vision for the future, not once mentioning her accident or her current struggles. For the first time in weeks, she felt like Amelia Hart the CEO, not Amelia Hart the victim. "Your facial recognition software," he said, leaning forward with genuine interest. "The applications for security systems alone could revolutionize the industry." "Could have," she corrected, her voice growing quiet. "We lost the Morrison contract last month. Without that funding." "Why did you lose it?" The question was direct, businesslike. She appreciated that he didn't dance around the subject. "They said I was no longer reliable. That my condition made me a liability." The words tasted bitter. Apparently, investors don't trust CEOs who can't even cross a street safely. Damien was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the table. When he spoke, his voice was lower, more personal. 5 years ago, I was in a plane crash in the Swiss Alps. Small aircraft, pilot error, mountain weather. He rolled his shoulders, and she noticed the slight stiffness in his movement. Spent 4 months in physical therapy learning to walk properly again. The doctors said I was lucky, the spinal compression could have left me paralyzed. Amelia's breath caught. I had no idea. Because I made sure no one knew. I conducted board meetings from my hospital bed, took calls during physical therapy sessions, and when I finally returned to the office, I made sure everyone saw strength, not struggle. His eyes met hers. But the struggle was real. Every day. Every step. How did you do it? How did you convince them you were still, you? I realized something during those months of recovery. The accident didn't change who I was, it revealed who I'd always been underneath. The determination, the resilience, the refusal to quit. Those weren't things I lost in the crash. They were things the crash forced me to find. His words hit her like a physical blow, knocking the breath from her lungs. She stared at him, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not the cold, calculating businessman from the magazines, but a man who understood exactly what she was going through. The Morrison contract, she said slowly. You know something about it. It wasn't a question. Something in his expression had shifted when she'd mentioned it, a flicker of guilt. Amelia. You know something. Her voice grew stronger, more insistent. The CEO was awakening, pushing through weeks of self-doubt and despair. What aren't you telling me? Damien set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. Around them, the auction continued, but their small table had become an island of tension in the sea of celebration. There are things about business, about competition, that aren't always clean, he said carefully. Sometimes we make choices that seem right in the moment but feel wrong in hindsight. What did you do? The question hung between them like a blade. Amelia felt her heart hammering against her ribs, but not from nervousness this time. From anger. From the growing certainty that this man who'd made her feel human again, was connected to her downfall. Tell me, she demanded, her voice carrying the authority that had built an empire. What did you do to my company? Damien's face went pale, and in that moment, Amelia knew. The truth hit her like a second collision, stealing her breath and making her grip her crutches until her knuckles went white. You, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the auction chatter. You're the reason Morrison pulled out. He didn't deny it. Couldn't deny it. The guilt was written across his features like a confession. Amelia, please let me explain. Explain. Her voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables. She didn't care. The woman who'd spent weeks feeling broken and worthless was discovering that her destruction hadn't been random at all, it had been calculated, deliberate, personal. You destroyed my company's future, and then you waltzed over here tonight to what, gloat? Finish the job. No. The word came out sharp, desperate. That's not why I'm here. She started to rise, her movements sharp with fury, but he reached out, not to stop her, but to steady her as she found her balance. Even in her rage, even knowing what he'd done, his instinct was to help her. The contradiction made her angrier. Don't touch me, she hissed, pulling away. Don't you dare touch me after what you've done. I sabotaged the Morrison deal, he said quietly, his voice carrying just far enough for her to hear. I used my connections, my influence. I made sure they saw you as a risk. The admission was like a physical blow. She'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed made her legs weak. She sank back into her chair, not from choice but from necessity. Why? The word came out broken, raw. Why would you do that to me? Damien ran his hands through his hair, destroying its careful styling. For the first time all evening, he looked less than perfectly composed. Because you were beating me, he said simply. Your facial recognition software was better than anything my companies had developed. The Morrison contract would have given you the funding to expand globally, to compete directly with my security divisions. I saw you as a threat. So you destroyed me. I tried to. His voice was heavy with regret. But then I watched you these past weeks. I saw how you handled the accident, how you kept fighting even when everyone else gave up on you. I saw the real Amelia Hart, not the competitor I'd been trying to eliminate, but the woman who refused to stay down no matter how hard life hit her. Amelia laughed, but there was no humor in it. So this is what, your apology tour? Ask the crippled CEO to dance and call it even? Don't. His voice turned sharp. Don't diminish yourself like that. You're not crippled, you're not broken, and you're sure as hell not defeated. That's what I realized watching you tonight. That's what made me walk over here. Guilt made you walk over here. No. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. Admiration made me walk over here. Respect. The recognition that I'd made the biggest mistake of my career, not just in business, but in judgment. She stared at him, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions crashing through her. Anger, betrayal, confusion, and underneath it all, something she didn't want to acknowledge, understanding. You want to know the truth? Damien continued, his voice growing stronger. I've been watching you for months, even before the accident. Not as a competitor, but as someone I genuinely admired. Your innovation, your leadership, your refusal to compromise your values even when it would have been easier. When I sabotaged that deal, I wasn't just hurting your company, I was betraying everything I claimed to respect about you. And the accident changed your mind. The accident showed me who you really are. When everything was stripped away, your mobility, your confidence, even your support system. You were still fighting. Still here. Still refusing to give up. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. It made me realize that I'd been so focused on competing with you that I'd forgotten to see you. Amelia felt tears threatening, but she blinked them back. She wouldn't cry. Not here, not in front of him, not after everything. What do you want from me, Damien? Forgiveness? Absolution? I want to make it right. You can't unmake what you did. No, but I can try to fix it. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through his contacts, and showed her the screen. Morrison CEO. One phone call, and I can tell him the truth about why I advised him against your company. I can recommend he reconsider. She stared at the phone, then at him. Why would you do that? It would hurt your own interests. Because some things matter more than business interests. His eyes met hers, and she saw something there she hadn't expected, vulnerability. Because I'd rather compete with you fairly than win by destroying you. Because you deserve better than what I did to you. The auction was ending around them, people beginning to mill about and prepare for the evening's close. But at their small table, time seemed suspended. And what about this? She gestured between them. This evening, this, whatever this was. This was me trying to show you what I should have seen all along. That you're remarkable, accident or no accident. That your worth isn't determined by your mobility or your setbacks, but by your character. He paused. And maybe hoping that someday, you might see something worth forgiving in me. Amelia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision before her. She could walk away, well, limp away, and let her anger consume her. She could hold on to the betrayal, use it as fuel for revenge. Or she could choose something harder, something that required more strength than she'd ever needed before. Make the call, she said quietly. What? Call Morrison. Tell him the truth. All of it. She opened her eyes and looked directly at him. And then we'll see what happens next. As Damien dialed the number, Amelia realized something profound. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or excusing what he'd done. It was about refusing to let his actions define her future. It was about choosing to move forward rather than remain trapped in the past. The conversation with Morrison was brief but effective. When Damien hung up, he looked at her with something approaching hope. He wants to meet with you next week. Fresh start, clean slate. And us? She asked. What are we? Whatever you want us to be. Competitors, partners, or... He smiled, and for the first time all evening, it reached his eyes. Maybe we could start with friends and see where it leads. Amelia Hart, CEO, survivor, and now something new. A woman who'd learned that true strength sometimes meant choosing grace over grudges, extended her hand. I'd like that, she said. I'd like that very much. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from never falling, but from choosing to rise with grace. Amelia discovered that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's the ultimate power move. When we release the weight of others' wrongs, we free ourselves to soar. True love often begins not with perfection, but with the courage to see beauty in brokenness and strength in vulnerability. Choose grace, choose growth, choose love.